We did a report in 2011 of the state of Colorado's biodiversity. This was in response to the Nature Conservancy saying, well, how do we know how we're doing with conservation? We've been at it for like 40 years here in Colorado or something like that. And so they wanted to know. And so we, and this is available on our website, where we really looked at the conservation status for all these different species and communities that we track. And looking at the threats and level of protection and that sort of thing. So for each of the different elements of biodiversity are reflected. And for example, this was something that I thought was really interesting that came out of that study, is that, so this is, it's not 100, they just analyzed 103 of the G1 and G2s, and the barren habitat, so this is like a shale barren habitat, and the barren habitats occupy just 1% of the landscape in Colorado, but support 80% of our most threatened species. So it can give a group like the Nature Conservancy the idea, okay, that's the state of where things are, and this is how we can move forward to have more of an impact. Okay? We used this report to, as I said, with our climate change vulnerability assessments, we're looking at exposure and sensitivity, and what we've added in here is this concept of adaptive capacity and what sort of changes. So I know you can't read this is too detailed, but the idea is that we've done a detailed analysis to look at these different, each one of these squares is a different plant community, and we're asking which ecosystems are most exposed to changing conditions, what are the most important climate variables, what makes ecosystems resilient, and how can managers adapt. That's where we're getting, what can we do to make changes in the face of climate change. And so we pulled together this report, just came out in October, that we gave to that was funded by the BLM, and it was this climate change vulnerability assessment for Colorado. And you know, not terribly surprising, we found that the most vulnerable ecological systems are riparian woodland and shrublands, shortgrass prairie, most vulnerable, the wetlands on the eastern plains, pinyon juniper woodlands, and here I'm going to show a little more detail. So here's an example of what they did in the red and in the brown here. These are areas of pinyon juniper that are occupied now and are expected between 2035 and 2050 to potentially not be around anymore, and especially in the face of drought and fire and that sort of thing. So it's, you know, it's a detailed analysis. Another report was where we were looking at the Gunnison sage grouse. So the pink here is the Gunnison Basin, and that's the global habitat for the Gunnison sage grouse. And what we were looking at is adaptation for climate change, particularly for what it needs for reproduction. And so the land managers working with a whole bunch of partners over in the Gunnison Basin, we determined some adaptations or modifications that needed to happen to the habitat in order to improve the potential for survival of that Gunnison sage grouse. And a lot of volunteers were involved, and they had a big increase in wetland plants, which those they need for the chicks of the Gunnison sage grouse. And this is a result of, you know, hundreds and hundreds of volunteer hours and figuring out what exactly to do. But they think it's really going to be a successful way to improve the likelihood of the Gunnison sage grouse responding to impacts from climate change. Another example of how we've used our data is to, again, to get the word out. We had the wetland and riparian plant association information. So we put together a nice guide to wetland plants. And these little pocket guides for the common plants of the Eastern Plains, and we've been getting these out. We also have a rare plant website on our website that really helps people just identify what do these species look like, where are they found, is this maybe one that I have in front of me or in my yard or that kind of thing. So we've been trying to make these educational materials available. So I hope that you can see through all of this that the heritage methods that we use where we're ranking species and we're asking the key biodiversity questions are methods that really can be used on a global, regional, statewide, eco-regional, or even a local level. You might just be in a little tiny state park, but you can still go through answering those key questions, looking at what's there, what are the ranks, and this sort of thing. So it really applies in a lot of different scales and in a lot of different levels. You can look at more of a multidisciplinary landscape approach or a species-specific approach to conservation. And the results that we've had have really been, we're very proud of. We were some of the folks that were very involved in identifying the significance of Soapstone and Reb Mountain Ranch here in Larimer County and expanding the Great Sand Dunes. Used to be a national monument, now it's a national park and preserve that is much larger than it used to be. And it includes more of the full biodiversity significance that's found down there using our data of pointing that sort of a thing out. So again, I just hope you can see how this can really provide a global perspective and really help with on-the-ground conservation work so that we can protect our most important biological resources moving into the future. So thank you very much, and I would be happy to take questions.